Okay, update on the Beast Fur Shawl cast and damage taken debugging I've been doing. It's been slow going because I just got stuck trying to figure out like why is this not working as well as I think it should. I think it should work relatively well. I've got a total life plus energy shield of like 6,000, which isn't too squishy. I'm running some flasks that convert some of the elemental damage taken to physical damage to elemental. I really shouldn't be exploding as hard as I do, and I think I figured out where the issue is coming from. So, in the world of cast and damage taken, one of the important things you have to figure out is your resources, right? If you're taking all that damage, how do you get it back? What we do is we are using absorption charges, right? So we have a power charge limit of 9, which is high, but we don't get to keep our power charges. Well, we don't get any of our power charges. We get absorption charges instead. And an absorption charge allows you to recoup 12% of elemental damage taken as energy shield per absorption charge. So we have 9 charges, so we get 108% of elemental damage taken back as energy shield, which seems like you would offset all elemental damage. Kinda. So there's two things. One, we actually get back twice as much because we are using Beast Fur Shawl. So we get like 216% of every point of elemental damage taken back as every elemental point taken from a hit back as energy shield. Right, so we have an insane recovery mechanism in there. The important thing is over 4 seconds. Now, this isn't the only source of recoup we got going on, of recovery going on, because we're pretty much doing everything on this character right now. It's gotten a little bit messy. Let me turn off the title. It makes it a little bit less distracting. Okay, so the belt gives us the recoup. So for every point we take, we get back 2, which is great. Right. And when we were using the Storm Secret Ring, which makes it so that we take 500 elemental damage for every time our lightning beam zaps things, well, that makes life a lot easier. It offsets that relatively easily. And then what the idea was like, well, maybe we can make it go faster if we put an Eye of Innocence on top. Eye of Innocence is only 100 damage every time you ignite something. But, I'll ignite an enemy. But, it scales with the number of enemies. It scales with the number of hits. It can go very quickly. And I very much underestimated how much damage I would be taking from that. So I think that the Eye of Innocence is actually exploding me. Whereas the Storm Secrets are just powering my cast and damage taken loop. Right, so my build probably would feel a lot better if I change this. Other than my stats. My stats would be an issue. Anyway, so we have kind of identified the bug. So to help illustrate this a little bit, let us go to... it's going to be a little bit of a flashbang. I'm sorry, folks. Hide you. There we go. Let's talk about leech. Because leech is the thing that's kind of offsetting instantly. Because we have 10% instant leech. We leech 20% of lightning damage. a little bit more, but 20% is what we get from the flask, which is insane, right? That number is bonkers. If it was 2%, it would be in line with other uniques. It's 20% instead. It's a really high number. 10% instant. So if our pool of energy shield is 2500, then our cap would be 250, which means that we need to do about 1250 damage post mitigation. Yeah, so we need 1250 damage. This is pre-mitigation, this is not post. And assuming 75% resistances, just to be a little bit on the safe side, we need to do about 5000 lightning damage per hit to get 25 life immediately back from instant leech. Right? That's not bad. Considering this is assuming a mitigation of 75%. What I've done with my character is I've bonked that. Turn that on, turn that off. I know what I'm doing. There we go. I horked that up pretty bad. So let's talk about some of the skills we have. We have Glacial Cascade, which hits for 600 damage. Herald of Thunder, 1700 damage. Ball Lightning, 50 damage, or 500 damage. Blade Vortex, 250 damage. We have all these things that have tiny hits. And they have a 100% chance to ignite. So we don't immediately offset our Eye of Innocence damage at all. That means that under certain circumstances, unless you had insane levels of recoup going on, which by the way we have, like the amount of energy shield we get in a second from recoup is probably north of 10,000 once you're actually running through maps. It's pretty ridiculous. But that doesn't help you when you are triggering, you know, a Blazing Salvo, a Glacial Cascade, a Ball Lightning, a Spark, what else? A Firestorm, a Soul Rend, a Blade Fall, and then we have like Ethereal Knives, Ethereal Knives, and a Blade Vortex. Like when all that stuff just triggers all at the same time, and you're in the middle of a pack of monsters. I mean, unless your recoup really is already at the point where you are getting insane amounts back, you just explode. And that's where we're at right now. We are at the point where we're doing decent damage. Our biggest issue is that Eye of Innocence does way more damage than we can handle right now under certain conditions. So that is kind of what stalled my progression, because I was dying too often. I also realized exactly how important the Vessel of Finctar was. Not from the perspective of shocking enemies near me, which is nice. Don't get me wrong, shocking things is nice. But from the perspective of 20% of lightning damage leached as life during effect. That 20% number offset so much of the Eye of Innocence damage that this was a massive boon to always have up and running. And when it wasn't up and running, then the Eye of Innocence would just murder us. because we didn't have a energy shield pool of 15,000 to ride it out a little bit. So yeah, that is where things went wrong with this version of the build. So a couple of takeaways in a future version. Scaling Eye of Innocence to do as much self-harm as 2 Storm Secret Rings is easier than you might think. I think my math ended up with like you have to ignite things 50 times a second. They're roughly in that ballpark to offset the 2 Storm Secret Rings. And the challenge is you want to ignite a single target 50 times a second. Right? Because packs of enemies, like, yeah, it's gonna work fine. Single enemies is really where we want to make sure that we have the uptime on our damage. And Storm Secret does a pretty good job of that by itself. But the opportunity cost is huge. It's 25% of my mana. It is 2 ring slots and a gem socket. That's painful. Those 2 ring slots is actually the biggest hit in the equation. The other thing is you can't scale it up. Right? If you are running everything on the concept of Eye of Innocence, then you ignite more, you do more damage, life is better. You can't really scale up your cast or your damage taken. You're kind of stuck with having X number of zaps that need to happen before your next cast and damage taken spell cycle triggers. And the Eye of Innocence speeds it up a little bit, probably by like a tick or 2, which has meaningful impact, but it's also very unwieldy the way that my build is set up right now. Like if you're standing in the middle of you're opening like a chest, that's a case where you end up in the middle of a lot of mobs. When you're running on top of Harbingers, also generates the same issue. Sometimes you just explode. High density things like breaches or abysses are also issues, and I want to be able to do those things. So that's where some of the issues are coming in. Okay, so I think this is the end of this adventure as far as leveraging Storm Secret. If I take Storm Secret out of the equation and the Eye of Innocence stays in, you know, what would life look like? Right, and right now my build really is the Graven Secret cloth belt, which is great. We have 2 Storm Secrets, the Beast Fur Shawl, which is amazing. I think it's amazing. And then I have the Malachite Loop to give me my power charges. And this thing gets +2 maximum power charges, which is fine. 20% chance to gain a power charge on hit, so you're always on max power charges. 15% increased spell damage per power charge. That line does nothing. Lose all power charges on reaching maximum power charges. You never will. Shocks you when you reach maximum power charges. Again, never is going to happen. Right, so this is just +2 maximum power charges and power charge generation. That's it. Alright, so let's talk about the recoup picture. Right now, we are recouping a lot. Right, we have 9 charges. 9 times 12% is like 108, I believe. Yeah, 108% of damage taken from hits, elemental hits, recouped as energy shield. I mean, once you hit 100%, then it's kind of a nice number, but because you have the Beast Fur Shawl, and this one is a 96% increased energy shield recovery rate, that means that instead of 108, it's more like 200 and some change. That's getting a little excessive. I don't think that I need 9 charges, because our recoup is ridiculously high anyway. If on the other hand I would say I'm gonna shoot for 6 charges, which would be like your 3 base charges and just the Malachi loop and the Graven Secret. Well, 6 charges times 12% is 172 of 72%, but then you roughly double it with the Beast Fur Shawl. If you have a well-rolled one, and let's be fair, the thing costs a chaos or 2, you can splurge for the 3 chaos version and get a near perfect rolled one. So in that case, you don't have like 72%, you get like 140%. That is still an insanely large amount of recovery you get, right? And this thing has okay energy shield, bunch lightning resistance, some maximum mana, yeah, sure. It doesn't have the greatest resist, but these 2 items together do provide you with insane recoup, especially if you get elemental damage taken on yourself. So I think that next league we're gonna go with Graveclaw's Secret, of a Graven Secret, Cloth Pelt. Get myself another Beast Fur Shawl. I have Innocence, and Malachi's Loop. And then we are going to go with a very fast hitting ability like Molten Strike. That's what I'm currently leaning towards. And we want to make sure that we comfortably exceed the numbers on here. Right? We're not going to look to get hits from things like Ball Lightning and Spark or Spellblade or things like that. We want things that do bigger hits. Like Ball Lightning is a trap. I shouldn't be running Ball Lightning. Switching this out for like, I don't know, Frozen Orb probably would help me tremendously, because that way my Ball Lightning doesn't just incinerate me. I am using like Blade Vortex and Ethereal Knives. Again, those are not the spells I want to be running. EK, it's controllable. Like you only get like what? How many blades do you fire? Good lord. 11. Right, so you only get 11 ignites, which is controllable. It's not too bad. But this should be more blue sockets and spells that have higher damage multipliers and fewer hits. Right? This thing has damage effectiveness of 30. That's awful for this build. I need higher damage effectiveness numbers. So, that's where we're at right now. I'm happy that I figured out what was causing it. I mean, there is no on-death report you get out of this game. To be fair, if you're playing a cast from damage taken build, the amount of garbage that would be shown on your on-death report would be absolutely bonkers. So it wouldn't be very useful. But I'm happy to have at least figured out where things were going wrong, because it was sometimes it's just doing absolutely fantastic and sometimes you just die. And when I then start hovering over all the mobs trying to figure out like what blew me up, I wasn't really able to find a pattern in the mobs. And then I figured out like, oh, I'm not offsetting my Eye of Innocence damage immediately. It is these large packs where I immediately die, and I usually take the pack with me. And that created a very deceptive idea that somehow that wasn't what was killing me. Anyway, so yeah, back to go buy some gems.